Welcome back to the Just Hyke Podcast, where we inspire women to step outside, build confidence on the trail, and reconnect with nature, one step at a time. Today's conversation is a special one. We're joined by author Jo Giese, whose journey into hiking began like so many of ours, looking for something more movement, more meaning, and more connection. But her story didn't stay there. After a freak accident left her with a serious Achilles injury. This episode is for anyone who has ever faced a setback, felt limited, or wondered if they could begin again. Because sometimes the path forward isn't about pushing harder, but it's about learning to walk differently. So let's get into it. Hi, Jo.
Hi, Melanie. I love that introduction. And may I say, just to clarify, because you say I started walking, hiking, been doing it forever, is that I really have been. This, when I was 5 years old, can you see this little frilly pinafore?
I can. Yes, I can't believe you still have it.
I couldn't believe it either. It was just like a couple weeks ago, months ago. I was in the garage here. We have closets in there, and I was opening up a closet to look for something, and there it was. Now, this is the kind of pinafore I used to walk and hike in when I was 5 years old.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and my mother used to sew them herself, more lace everywhere. We lived in Seattle on Lake Washington Boulevard. And I would leave the house about 5, 6 years old, wearing all dressed up in my frilly, lacy pinafore. And I would go from our house over to Seward Park, which was just a few blocks from the house. And it turns out that Seward Park in Seattle was designed by the Olmsted brothers, who designed like Central Park in New York City, one of the most beautiful in the world. And I would walk over there. I'd take a couple pushes on the swing, and then I'd leave the swing set and I'd walk on this soft bark path up to the old growth forest in the middle of the peninsula there.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, the trees were 2 and 3 stories high, just this beautiful green canopy. Then I'd walk back down and I'd walk home. And a retired cop who lived next door to us said to my mom at a certain point, because he would watch me, walking off to the park by myself in the pinafore, and he'd say, "You might consider that it would be better if she did not do this by herself." And my mom, the original non-helicopter parent, said, "Yeah, but she likes it." That was when I really started walking and hiking.
Wow. Yes, from a very young age.
Very young, because later in life, that even walking, let alone hiking, was totally just taken away from me. It really registered in a very painful way.
Right. Now, you said you started hiking from a very long age, like wandering into the forest essentially from your neighborhood house and from your neighborhood. And so, did you continue to hike throughout your teenage years and your young adult years, or did you move away from that as you aged?
No, I continued hiking and walking in nature. And then when my current husband and I got introduced 20 years ago, his previous spouse had died, and unfortunately mine had too. And he had a place in Montana and in Bozeman. And, that's like one of the great places to hike in the world, especially, which I am so waterfall centric, to hike to waterfalls. And I have a buddy there, Brad, whom I hike with when my husband goes fly fishing. And that's kind of a match made in heaven, to pick up your hiking poles. And maybe we'll get to this later about making sure that you are dressed and equipped properly for these hikes you're doing.
Yeah,
Nothing,
yes.
Nothing makes me crazier than to see people out on the trail who are not equipped to be there.
I know people show up and, well, they're on holiday, right? Especially around Bozeman, you're at Yellowstone or whatever. People are expecting sidewalks and boardwalks and things like that. And they show up in their shorts and their flip-flops, and somehow they end up 3 miles out into nature and they have no idea where they're at and what they're doing.
Well, one day, I'll just tell you briefly about this. One day, my hiking buddy, Brad, and I were hiking outside of Bozeman in an area in Big Timber, I don't know, 50 miles away or so. And Brad had introduced me to this particular hike because there were two waterfalls on it, and which was cool. But we didn't summit the mountain that day, going to the very tippy top, because it was getting close to noon. It was summer. We didn't want to go out in that when it would be up there when it was that hot. And so we're coming down, and coming up to the trailhead is a woman, a single woman by herself. She looks like she's dressed to, I don't know, like walk in downtown New York City or something. She doesn't have on flip-flops, but she just has on like tennis shoes. She has no sun hat on. She looks like she has no sunscreen. She has no bear equipment like the bear whistle I always have, or the bear bells I always have attached to my hiking poles. None of that. And she had no water with her.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, that's the worst, right?
And so we asked her what she's doing. We thought, oh, maybe she's just gonna hang around the parking lot and drive somewhere. No, she is going to summit the mountain. And
Yeah.
she's starting out at almost 12 noon by herself. And I thought, there is a stupidity for this. And she personified it. I mean, really. But should we talk about my accident and why I lost the ability to walk completely?
Yes, let's get into that. So, you were sharing, first of all, I want to share your book. You have your new book out. It's called You'll Never Walk Alone. And I really enjoyed reading that. And in it, you talk about your tragedy and your freak accident of what happened. So, please get into that and take it away from there.
I was upstairs. It was a rainy, late November day. I was upstairs working in my office, and my friend Lana is ringing the doorbell down there at the front door. And I think, oh, I don't want her to get wet. So I put away my work here. I race out, I race down the steps, and I miss the bottom two stairs.
Ow.
And I go flying horizontally. I know something really bad has happened. I don't know what. My husband heard me crash. He comes running. I said, go get Lana. She's getting wet. He lets Lana in. And the two of them get me to the urgent care in our neighborhood right before it closed. And they take an x-ray immediately. And the doctor looks at my x-ray, and she said, and her face just turns white. And she says, I hate to tell you this, but you have a complete rupture of your left Achilles, and you're going to need surgery. But instead of this making me feel awful or scared or frightened, I think, oh, I know an orthopedist. I'll call him. I mean, he can take care of this. So I call Fred. This is what I call the doctor in the book. I call him from urgent care. And I tell him what happened, and he says, sure, come in tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. So Ed rents a wheelchair from urgent care. The next morning at 8 a.m., he wheels me into the orthopedist's office, and they take another x-ray, but he doesn't even really look at the x-ray. He just says to me, I can do this. I did Achilles repair 20, 30 years ago. I can do this.
That should have been your first.
Melanie, you strike me as very smart and with it. And if some doctor, for whatever malady, and it doesn't have to be your Achilles, anything, said, sure, I used to do this 20, 30 years ago, you would go out and say, or you would say right then, thank you very much, Fred, but we are going to find someone who did this 20, 30 minutes ago.
Gotcha.
But
Yeah, technology changes, right?
oh my God. But there I am. I'm already in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
The fall was so bad, the whole left side of my body is turning black and blue and purple. I'm totally bruised.
You were probably in shock.
Oh, I was totally in shock. And
Hmm.
there is someone who before had done a little tweak on actually, it was my left knee. And that turned out okay. And so there he is right in front of me. And he says, I can do this. So we're not rushing out to research the subject, which is what we should have done. And so he puts me on his schedule first thing that Monday morning. And then my leg is elevated and I'm in a cast and everything for the next 12, 14 days. And that period wasn't so terrible because the neighbors on the street, especially wonderful cook, a Persian, kept bringing me wonderful big bowls of Persian food. And at one point, this Persian food with this saffron rice and her husband, she said that she used to make this for her husband before they got married. It was one reason why he married her. And he said, well, could I have some of that now before she brings it over to me? And she says, no, this is all for Joe. And lots of neighbors really came in and comforted me during that period of time. And so that's also the kind of the title of the book, You'll Never Walk Alone, is that it takes a whole community to recover
Hmm.
from what I'm eventually going to have to recover from. And I go in there, and 14 days later, the surgeon has returned from his vacation wherever he was in the Caribbean, and they unwrap all this casts and everything. And then we look at this for the first time, and the area where he went in and did the surgery, where there's a wound, has turned, he said, that's necrotic. And I'm not even sure up until that moment if I even knew the word necrosis, but it means dead.
Uh-oh.
And, and the area around where the wound was had died. Now, the last thing you want in your body is a totally dead area. Like if that becomes sepsis and spreads throughout your body, you are really in trouble. So the surgeon says to me that what we need to do is to get you to a trauma wound surgeon to deal with the necrosis, the death, the dead area around the wound. 3 or 4 surgeries later, dealing with the necrosis, what the trauma wound surgeon says to me, okay, now we're going to have a 3 or 4 hour. And of course, during this whole time, I was not walking. I was on a knee scooter, getting around on a knee scooter. My husband was stuck trying to fold up that scooter and put it into his car, which he
Hmm.
hated doing every time he did it. You could have heard him swearing from where
Yeah.
he
They're
my
probably
husband.
just as complicated as the baby strollers nowadays. They seem
Well,
to get more and more complicated.
it was pretty clumsy for him to try to do that.
Mhm.
And but my knee scooter to try this turn this unfun business into something a little more fun. I put on one of
Oh, a
these
little bell,
a
a
little
bicycle bell.
yeah on my knee scooter so that people could hear me coming and just to have a little bit of joy in this process. So the trauma wound doctor says, okay, your next surgery is going to be about 4 hours. What we're going to do is we're going to clean up this wound area, and then Fred, the doctor who had done the original Achilles work, he's going to be there making sure that the Achilles has reattached correctly during that surgery he did. So about an hour later, I'm in the recovery area. And there comes in this trauma wound surgeon. And I'm confused because what's going on? I'm back here way too soon. And he said that there was nothing to reattach, that the Achilles, the strongest tendon in your body that goes from your ankle up your calf,
Mm-hmm.
in my case, had become, had never reattached during that first surgery and had died.
Wow.
And he said, "Do you want to see its picture?" So the strongest tendon in my body, he showed me the picture, had curled up on itself and become like this little fetal organism. And it was in this black, slimy mess.
Uh-oh.
So now we're not just dealing with the wound, which wasn't healing properly. Now we're dealing with it. I don't have an Achilles. And when you see these athletes, they're usually male athletes, often basketball stars like Kevin Durant or something, and they complain about they have an Achilles rupture. They just have a rupture. They haven't lost it. So it can be medically, surgically reattached. They can work on their, getting back in shape for a year. Often they will not be back at peak performance. Kevin Durant was an exception. He was, but they still have an Achilles. I didn't have one. So what am I going to do now? And the at one point I started I ended up with 8 surgeries.
Wow,
Uh,
that's a lot. So with
yeah,
your foot function, if you don't have an Achilles, can your foot like do heel toe like when you're walking?
no, you
No.
can't. No, you can't. What you can't, when you walk, and I have a whole chapter in the book about this, that someone asked for, about how to be a pedestrian, where you push off on your foot, you push off on your big toe. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, my big toe is no longer connected to the Achilles, and I can't push off. It was suggested to me by the trauma wound surgeon that I start some physical therapy. He did some other surgeries. In the meantime, he took a flap of skin from somewhere else and put it over the wound area. I mean, there was a lot going on during this. And so I went to several physical therapists, and I ended up with one in Montana. And I knew this woman. I had kind of liked her. I had had her up to the house for lunch. Her mother and my mother had unfortunately died about the same time. So we commiserated over that loss. I was entertained by her stories of her widowed father dating again in his 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went into the physical therapy facility, and she asked me to walk across the facility, and she watched me. Then she had me walk in between these parallel bars, not holding on. Then she had me come into her little office there. And she said to me, and I'll never forget this, she said to me, "I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but you have to accept that you are going to be compromised for the rest of your life."
Wow.
Now, when she said that, all I had at that point was hope. Hope that I could get better, hope that I could get back to walking again, and God forbid someday get back to hiking again to my favorite waterfalls. And she was totally cutting off that hope. Nope, this is as good as you're going to get. I never, ever spoke to her again.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the reason I wrote this book is that when someone is given a grim diagnosis, and it doesn't have to be your left Achilles, it can be anything. It can have to do with diabetes, a cardiac condition, you name it. You do not have to accept that grim diagnosis. You can fight against it. And I did. And it was more or less probably around that time that the doctor who had botched the surgery, and he knew how bad my situation was, sent me a text. And he said, you know, you might try CORE, the Center of Restorative Exercise.
Ah, okay.
And his suggesting that I go there was his acknowledgement of how serious my situation was. Because when you pull up at CORE, and I was driven there, at this point, I wasn't driving either. I wasn't walking well. I wasn't driving. And when you walk in there, everybody, and it's not your normal gym, like with all kinds of, equipment to build up your abs and, build up your glutes. This is a place where almost nobody there is walking. They are in wheelchairs, they are using walking devices, they are hanging from these systems that hang in the air that help them walk. And the director of CORE, Taylor Isaacs, had me come into the evaluation room, which has a nice red walls, so it doesn't look medicinal and it doesn't look as dreary as what's going on there. And he, although he'd worked with seriously, severely injured people, they're all out there, trying to learn to walk again. He had never worked with anyone without an Achilles. And he has a couple PhDs in sports medicine. And he said he took me on to put all of his PhDs to work to see if together we couldn't conquer this. And the first time I went over there to CORE, I thought, I'll go once. And that's it, because Northridge is so far from where I live. It's like asking someone to drive from LA to London. I mean, I said, I'll go one time. And I went and then when I got healthier and stronger, Taylor would let me go 3 days a week. And I worked with Taylor 3 days a week for 2.5 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
To learn to walk again. And in the book, I quote Taylor at one point where he says, when people say to you, you're like in the 1% who are walking again with this problem, this injury. He said, no, 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 no. You tell them you're in the 0.01%.
Wow, it's that rare.
Most people would not. I mean, I'll just tell you one story.
Sure.
Because I don't know anyone else who has completely lost an Achilles. And I was reading the New York Times, and there was a letter to the editor. And some guy in Florida who used to ride his bike 50 miles a day had had an accident on his bike. And because of the accident, he had lost his Achilles. He had injured it and it had died. He had no Achilles. So I found this guy in Florida and I called him and I said, tell me about your story. He was 73 years old. At that point, he had had 3 surgeries. He also had an infection like I had. The whole area down there became necrotic, and he totally lost his Achilles. But after 3 surgeries, he gave up. He threw in the towel. He did not want to pursue this anymore. I was like, I couldn't believe it. That didn't occur to me at all, that I could. Friends at a certain point during this journey would say to me, do you consider that you're an ex-hiker or an ex-walker? And I went, absolutely not. I am going to be walking again. But this guy in Florida at a certain point just didn't have the spirit or the energy to pursue a solution where he could walk again. And this ties into my story about Obo's boots.
Yes. I love your hiking boots. I think they're beautiful.
They're fabulous. And I have been wearing Obo's hiking boots for a dozen years. And out of the blue, they honored me as a local hero. This was after my recovery when I'm starting to walk again and hike short distances. And so I called Paige at Oboes and I said, "Hey, Paige, why did you honor me?" Because they honored people from all over the country, not just people from Montana where they're located. And Paige said, "Because of your determination and grit, GRIT in capital
Mm.
letters." And I was just determined that that I would not be an ex-walker or an ex-hiker.
While
Sorry.
you were going through your surgeries, did you ever wonder that you would ever hike again?
I thought about it. The My visual mantra, you keep things in your mind, was a path to a favorite waterfall outside of Bozeman. It's
Oh, nice.
it's Highlight, and it's a easy 40-minute drive out of Bozeman. I mean, until you get to the dirt road, to the last dirt road with all the potholes to the waterfall. And what interested me kind of during this time is that what my mantra was, the visual mantra I kept thinking about, was the entrance path. That once I put foot on that entrance path, I would kind of be home again. And what interested me about that is it wasn't that waterfall then that brought me the most relief. It was just stepping onto that path. And I wanted to take a moment to just talk about waterfall medicine. And about the same time that I started hiking as a 5-year-old in Seattle, my parents took me to a waterfall just outside of Seattle, Snoqualmie Falls. And it is exactly what you want a waterfall to be. It is big and the water thunders down and you can get mist on your face and you're vibrating with the total pleasure of it. And that's pretty much when waterfall became part of my DNA and I became a waterfall junkie. It wasn't until just recently and I've hiked to waterfalls all over the world. You name it, New Zealand, Bhutan, China, Vietnam, you name it, and I've hiked to a waterfall there. But I didn't realize that 100 years ago, there was coined a term, waterfall effect. And what this means is that in the air, there are negative air ions, which ironically, the negative air ions are the positive ones for us. They make us feel better. And the air near a waterfall has 100,000 negative air ions per cubic centimeter versus there in your office or mine, we're lucky maybe we even have 100. So this waterfall effect is what really explains why we feel so good near a waterfall. And I was not going to give that up.
Yeah, so that's a very powerful visualization, right? So that was your goal to get to a waterfall again, and you showed great determination and as Oboes says, grit to get to that trailhead so that you could reach that waterfall.
And the craziest thing is that the Oboes people because I'm their local hero, they send me another pair of Oboes hiking boots every season. Now,
Really?
now that's wonderful. But one thing we really need to talk about
What's that?
is is the title of the book, You'll Never Walk Alone, is the importance of friends and people who gather around, who
Hmm.
make you know that your recovery matters to them, that your recovery is important to them. I was reading something and it doesn't sound like science, but it was written by a scientist that when you're like, let's say you're in the hospital, if you receive flowers or even a magazine, you are likely to be discharged a day earlier. During this recovery process, the house was filled with flowers that people were sending. People were checking in on me all the time. I certainly would not have recovered as well as I did without all those people letting me know that it mattered to them. Oh, and I have to tell you one story in particular that everybody has related to. And I was so surprised that this is a part of the book that people singled out from like the very beginning, like one of the first interviews I did, or I guess it was when I was working with the audio engineer doing the audio book.
Mm-hmm.
And, and he was at that moment going through a divorce after 21 years of marriage. And maybe that's also why he connected so much with the Ed character in the book. Ed is my husband. And at one point, and Ed was there literally with me every step of the way. And at one point in here, that I say Joe for Ed, Ed for Joe. We were and are a team. Teamwork works. And that is really important to have a partner like that who is on this journey with you. When Taylor at CORE put together a recovery plan for me, and he called me the CEO of my recovery team, and he put together a plan that included a medical acupuncturist, that included shockwave therapy, a podiatrist, a massage therapist, but don't think gentle massage. This was to break up the scar tissue. You,
Mm-hmm.
you could have heard me screaming where you are in Houston when she would try to break up that scar tissue. It would hurt that much. But so
But
I'm,
Ed was part of your team.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was there every pun intended step of the way.
Yeah. It's good to have, it's definitely beneficial to have somebody on your side who's rooting you on and, even helping you get from point A to point B, right? So it sounds like you had a lot of support in your recovery. Now, what would you say to someone who is struggling to get back outside after an injury? Let's say they had a shoulder injury or a broken ankle or, God forbid, an Achilles tear. What would you say to someone who, was struggling to get back outside?
What we know is, the Japanese have this term forest bathing, that what we know is that being outside, being in nature, very, very helpful to us from all kinds of reasons. And then forest bathing with water nearby, whether it's a stream or you're lucky enough to have a waterfall, is even healthier for us. So I would just tell them to go slow. And this is another part. I mean, you don't have to race up the mountain. You can just start slowly. I mean, this is another part of my journey that's pretty painful. At a certain point, I said to Taylor, who's the person who helped me walk again, and I was like walking outside my house here on this road, and I'd say, but Taylor, people are whizzing by me. I'm walking at half the speed I used to walk because I can't push off on that big toe, right? And he says, Joe, to compare is to despair. Stop it.
I like
So,
that term.
right. And so nowadays, I walk at pretty much half the speed. I did a sunrise hike, my first sunrise hike. It turned out last summer. I had never realized I had never done a sunrise hike before, but I get there, and I guess because it's Bozeman, Montana, To my surprise, at 7 o'clock in the morning, there were about 30 people there. I
Really?
didn't expect that many. And they had these big pots of fire. And so this is about 4 years after my accident. I'm walking again, not fast, at half speed, but I show up. And so then the group starts walking, and it's not a big hike. It's more like a gentle stroll there's a little pedestrian bridge across a stream. And I mean, this is really no big deal. In my previous life, this wouldn't have even constituted much. So there's a guy, and he and I sort of start walking together, and he tells me about a recent trip of his to Taiwan, where outside his hotel room in Taipei, all he did is he just opened the door, he stepped out, and he could start hiking up the mountain. And I'm enjoying listening to his stories, but we are lagging further and further and further behind the rest of the group. And so at a certain point, I tell him, look, go on ahead. Because I realized that was the first group hike I'd ever done after my accident. And I realized I can't keep up with a group. I used to be like the head of the group, and people are trying to keep up with me, but now I can't keep up. And on the way home, it was sad because I'm driving home 3 hours earlier than I expected to be. But what I found, and I think if you approach life with a sense of joy rather than a sense of despair, like, oh, woe is me, you can find different solutions. There's a woman who just lives up the mountain from us, our very mountain on the very top. We can see her house. And she had started a walkie-talkies group. And so I asked Connie what this is. And Connie said, it's a group. We walk as slowly so we can chat and talk together. I can no longer race up the top of the mountain with a hiking group like that, but I can walk with Connie's walkie-talkies, and I've actually formed a walkie-talkies group here too. And that has its own pleasure too. It's a different kind of pleasure, but you have to find what you can do and what brings you. And now Connie and I mean, we just met out of the blue at Walkie Talkies, and we've become friends. She just texted me the other day and asked how we're doing and when we're going to be back. And
That's wonderful. It brings me to the thought of different paces. And you were saying you used to be the front of the group, and now you're at the back of the group. And now, probably with your walkie-talkie group, you're at the same pace as everybody there because the mindset is a little bit different. You're all walking at your own pace so that you can slow down and enjoy the nature and just enjoy each other's company rather than trying to race to a destination. Does that make sense?
yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it takes a few, like going out there, if you're trying to find a group or hike with a group or going on some of these group hikes, because I know different people struggle with different paces. Like sometimes, like even for me, there's one certain group in the area where I am where they're like super fast hikers, and I just don't enjoy that type of a hike all the time. I like to stop. I like to take pictures of the flowers. I like to observe the nature and the butterflies and things like that and hear the birds. And if the group is going too fast, then I just don't find that enjoyable. And so it takes a little bit of time to find that right pace for you. So, and especially with an injury, now you have to rediscover what's enjoyable for you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you just about hiking in general,
Yeah.
and one potential benefit, although I hadn't been thinking about this, but you were talking about how can you get people to go out and do this. When I first moved to Southern California from New York, I joined a hiking group out of the Pacific Northwest, which is it's part of LA, the Pacific Palisades, not the Pacific Northwest. And she would conduct a hike like every, I think it was Wednesday night in the summer, when it stays late longer. And And I got to know her and her husband. He was a documentary filmmaker. And then at a certain moment, unfortunately, her husband died. She continued, in spite of his death, to lead these hikes. And then at a certain point, sometime later, she showed up on the hikes with a blue eyeshadow on and like a little extra makeup. And I thought, I wonder what's going on here. And it turns out that one of the guys who had showed up on the hikes had invited her out, and
Oh,
they started dating. And so the people out there who might even want to meet somebody, you can also potentially do it on a hike.
that's
But
right.
I do have to I have to really tell you something.
What's that?
Uh, Over this period of time, people have said to me, you in your situation, you are a medical miracle. And it always kind of made me stiffen a little bit. I didn't know if that was hyperbole or if that was correct. And so I was in a doctor's office a couple months ago, had nothing to do with my Achilles or ankle or any of that situation. And I said to him, I said, people are telling me I'm a medical miracle. Is that hyperbole or is that correct? And he thought about that. He really did. He kind of thought, and he went, most people without an Achilles would be doing well if they could walk around their living room. Yeah, I would say you're a medical outlier. You're a medical miracle.
There you go. Good job. All because you wanted to chase a waterfall.
Again, absolutely.
Yes, yes, that draw of nature. Now,
Right.
you mentioned and you've shown on your necklace there, you're holding a whistle. And I remember in your book, yes, in your book you had there's a couple of stories about a bear encounter. You want to share that with me?
Oh, the bear in the house. Oh,
Yes,
that's crazy. Yeah.
absolutely.
But the whistle is on the hike
Yes.
where I often hike in areas where there are bears.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have a whistle, if you don't have like a bear belt on your hiking pole, if you don't have bear spray, you are in a dangerous situation. But this didn't happen when we were hiking. This was at our place in Montana. And my husband and I had gone out for breakfast and a little hike, and we were coming back. We bought some groceries, and they were in those kind of slick plastic bags, that kind of you have to kind of hold on to them extra tighter. They're going to fall out of your arms. And so when you walk into the garage from our house into the kitchen where I'm going to put these bags away, I'm not looking straight ahead to where the kitchen is. I'm just trying to hold on to these bags so, the wine bottles don't fall out and we have a big mess. And I'm about 7 feet away from the kitchen counter. And I look up, I will never forget this. And about 7 feet from me, I am eye to eye with a black bear. The
Yikes.
The black bear is standing with his butt to the kitchen counter. So he is face to face with me. My husband, who'd been driving the car and he was coming in after me, says at that point, I yelled out, bear. And there's a laundry room right there. And I scooted into the laundry room and closed the little pocket doors there. Those pocket doors are as flimsy as if, I mean, they're not worth anything. And
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not too upset then. I pull out my cell phone and I'm going to call 911. But I was so upset. First of all, I can't dial. I'm trembling too much. But I
Mm-hmm.
had also forgotten in my fright that we don't have cell phone service up there then.
Oh no.
So that wasn't going to work either. And the little windows in the laundry room are too small to crawl out of. At a certain point, my husband yells to me, he says, I'm going to go around front. like he knows and understands about bears and he's going to open the front door and let the bear out or something.
Hopefully, that would be awesome if he would do that.
Right. And I guess he redecided about that. He came back and he yelled to me from the garage, "Come to the garage. We're going to go get help." And that was one of the totally scariest moments of my entire life. Opening those doors, and I was afraid I was going to be eye to eye with that bear. And,
Right.
and I just pulled them open. I don't hear anything. I don't hear the bear. I pull them open. I look a little bit and I don't see the bear. And I race down the hallway out to the garage. I don't know where the bear is at that point, but he wasn't chasing me yet. And we get in the car, and as Ed starts pulling away to go down our mountain, the bear, there's a front door to the house, and right to the left of the front door, there's this big square window. And the bear had crawled up on top of my husband's electronic keyboard and was standing in the window like this. He occupied the entire window, watching us drive away.
Oh my gosh.
And as my husband said to me then, "Look who's in charge now." And we went down to the firehouse, and the guys there were a lot of volunteers. They were painting the firehouse that's at the bottom of our mountain. And we said, "Does anybody here know about bears?" Now, these are macho Montana cowboy types. If they didn't know about bears, they would not tell us. They all say, "Sure." And so they put down their paintbrushes, they hop into their pickups, they follow us home, they open every door, every window, and they get the bear out. But in the meantime, I have managed to successfully call 911 and connect with them. And the bear wardens, two of them, show up just about then, much, much quicker than 911 said they would. And after they look around the house and they tell us what the bear was doing and what the bear wanted in the house, and they show us the bear scat in the dining room and all these different things. She gives me her card, one of the bear wardens, and she said, and has her cell number. And she said, "Call me when the bear returns."
Uh-oh.
I know. And I'm going like, "Returns?" And she said, "Yes, because he found food here." The way he'd gotten in the house is I had left a little piece of very smelly, good smelly Parmesan cheese on the kitchen counter. And because I didn't know any better then, I left the kitchen window cranked open just a couple inches.
Uh-oh.
The bear outside got a whiff of that really fragrant cheese, crawled in that window, was very dainty artist, didn't break any of the glasses in the sink or anything. And so my husband, who'd had that place at that time for about 20 years and never had a bear in the house, was very dismissive of the bear returning. And I said, "Well, what do we do if the bear returns?" And so her partner said, "Bang together heavy pots and pans, that clanging sound. They hate that sound." And I said, "That's my defense against a bear."
Mm-hmm.
And later that evening, as I'm making dinner, I look out the front door, and to the right, well, he was actually to the left of the front door, the bear is standing there, almost like ringing the doorbell.
Oh no.
He wants more Parmesan cheese. And while I still have eye contact with the bear, I get my phone, the landline, thank you, and I call the bear warden who'd given me her cell number, and I say, "The bear's here." And I probably say it stuttering and, scared to death. And she says, "Okay, I'll get somebody up there immediately, and we'll transport the bear 100 miles away to a different territory, so he won't be back bothering you anymore." And that's what happened. They got a huge cylinder up there. The ramp to the cylinder, they planted with fermented fruit, which is apparently very attractive to the bears. And the and then the guy drives away with the cylinder there in the driveway. And the next morning, we expect that night that we're going to hear that trap door, that ramp slam shut when the bear eats the fruit and gets up inside the cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
We don't hear anything.
Uh-oh.
So the next morning, I go down very slowly. I go out into the garage. We have a little window in the garage. I look out and the ramp is up. So somebody is in the cylinder. Now, it could have been a deer on the property. It could have been anything.
Mm-hmm.
I get the bear warden on the phone, and she says, okay, she said, because the cylinder is closed, the ramp is up. She stays on the phone while I'm talking as I'm walking around to the cylinder, and there is our bear trapped in the cylinder.
Aw, poor bear.
Yeah. And then instead of looking fierce like how he did when I first saw him in the kitchen, eye to eye with this, 6 foot tall bear. And everybody who asks you, how big is the bear in your house? And you give the standard Montana reply, a bear in your house is as big as a skyscraper, because that's how it feels. But then when the bear is in the cylinder, he looks meek and he's all scrunched up and he looks small and sad and unhappy.
Aw.
And they take him away to another territory. And the guy who came and got him said, "You are so lucky." The people who he was going to their house next to get the bear had come into, they were in Big Sky. The bear had come into their house and they were gone for about 10 hours before they came back. And the bear rampaged their entire house, tore it all to pieces, trying to get out.
Wow.
Yeah. And the only damage we had from the bear really was, he scratched the floor, he peed on some chairs, but nothing in terms of, but we were only gone also for like a couple hours. So
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So tell me about the whistle around your neck. When you're hiking, have you ever come across a bear coming towards any of your waterfalls?
oh, absolutely.
Do you?
And the fear when you're hiking in places where there are bears around is that when you come around a curve or a corner on the trail, you don't know who's going to be right there, right in your face.
Right.
And I've never had a bear on the trail that close to me, but I've certainly had a bear and a whole family of bears, a mother and some cubs, maybe 20 yards away. And the first time I saw this when we were hiking in the Metcalf Wilderness area outside of Bozeman, there was a guy, he came up and he said, "There's a bear over there." Well, of course, we saw the bear by that point. And there were a few other hikers on the trail. And so he said to us, cluster together to make us look like a bigger group. And then he tried to calm us down by saying, "He's got a gun. We're okay." But he had a shotgun. What you need if you're going to injure a bear is you need a rifle. So he didn't know what he was talking about either. One of the things that I loved so much about helicopter hiking in New Zealand is they have no predators. There,
Mm-hmm.
there are no bears in New
Mm-hmm.
Zealand. There are no snakes in New Zealand. I'm also really not happy about snakes. And so there's none of this feeling like you do not have to wear a bear whistle when you're hiking in New Zealand.
Right.
Um, so it just makes it so much calmer.
Yes, we don't have bears here where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm very close to the National Forest and we have the Lone Star hiking trail here. We have some deer, We have some of the wild hogs, like the wild boars, that will be on the trails and are out in the forest, and but they're more scared of you than what we're equally scared of each other. Let's put it that way. So
Right.
if one of the hogs hears you coming, they typically will scatter away before you come up upon them. Now, I've heard that for bears, and for the reason for bear bells is that, if they hear that jingly noise, we're basically announcing ourselves, and they'll hear that noise and they'll typically move away. They're not attracted to the bell. It's not a dinner bell. They're not coming for lunch, but
Right.
they'll hear you coming and then they'll scamper away, let's say. So is that what you believe to be true with hiking in Montana and in bear country?
Oh, sure, absolutely. What they tell us to do is when you're hiking to always keep talking because
Mm-hmm.
the bears will hear the conversation and the communication and they'll stay away. They don't want to participate in that. But and that's why I also always say, even if you've got the bear bells on your hiking poles and everything, please don't go hiking alone. I know maybe, I don't know if you encourage people to hike by themselves, but I don't. I think, I remember specifically one day I was hiking. This is also in Montana. And there was an older woman on the trail. My hiking buddy and I were coming down the trail, and there was an older woman and short gray hair. And she had really done something bad to her ankle on that trail. And she was with a group of about 6 or 7 other people hiking together. And there was no cell phone reception up there on that mountain. But because she was with a group, someone from the group ran down the mountain from where to where they could get reception, made a call. By the time we got down the mountain, that there was someone at the bottom of the mountain with a gurney that was coming up the mountain to rescue that older woman. She couldn't walk at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And if she had been hiking by herself, oh, I'm just going to go out and take a little hike up the mountain, and she broke her ankle completely, and I don't know what else. And how is she going to get down the mountain if she's just gone out for a little hike by herself?
By yourself, yeah.
So, so I really don't advise that to people.
No, I agree. There's always a certain safety in numbers, right? Safety in groups. If somebody, I know people who have tripped and they've smashed their nose up, or they've tripped and they've separated their shoulder or had a shoulder injury, and then now you have to do a self-rescue. We have certain safety equipment that we can have if you are going solo, like your Garmin InReach or other things that can help you get help or press an SOS button, right? But I definitely recommend if you can hike in a group, hike in a group. I know that's not always feasible, just like running or walking out on the streets. It's always safer in numbers if something happens, but sometimes you have to go alone, unfortunately. And then some people prefer that solitude too. So just different safety recommendations, have some sort of service where you can get help if something goes wrong. Like, what is your plan if you are alone? What can you do to either self-rescue or to call 911, press the SOS button, whatever it is?
And also, if you're hiking in bear territory and you have bear spray, I think some people think a bear spray is, this will do it. This will help. All you need is the bear spray. And I don't know, have you ever used bear spray, Melanie?
I've used pepper spray, but not bear spray.
Okay. We tried bear spray out in our driveway once.
Uh-huh.
And bear spray, first of all, it's this big yellow cloud that comes out. And you really have to know what you're doing. This is not for amateurs
Mm-hmm.
because you have to know what way the wind is blowing, and
Exactly.
wind can change at random.
Yeah.
And if you think you're spraying the bear, depending on how that wind is moving, you could end up spraying yourself and you could end up in the hospital from that bear spray. Uh,
Absolutely.
Open that bear spray first, try it out, familiarize yourself with how it works because it's powerful once you open that up.
Absolutely. And that's the same recommendations if you're using pepper spray as a self-defense. You have to be cautious of the wind. And that's why a lot of self-defense instructors actually don't like the pepper spray as a self-defense tool because you do get that back spray or that back, depending on the wind, right? So that,
Right.
it makes me think of the guy with the shotgun. It may not injure the bear, but just the noise could, like kind of clanking the pots together. You don't have two pots to clank together, but you have a gun that you can fire off and it makes that loud bang.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it could be powerful. Right.
yeah. So I think really the best thing is that chatter, talking, your bear bells, have your whistle, blow it once in a while. What else would there be? Someone mentioned the other day, we were talking about the what is it called? Oh, like music. You know how some people play music on the trail and how it's kind of disturbing other people's peace and quiet and their ability to enjoy nature. But if you're in bear country, it might be a good idea to play a little bit of music or something or an audiobook, whatever it is, so that you have that constant noise going so that it does alert wildlife that you're coming around the corner. Does that make sense?
It does, but I wouldn't like, I don't like the idea of being out there hiking in a beautiful remote area and hearing somebody's music.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah. But if you're hiking alone and if you're in the deep wilderness, maybe a little bit of music will help keep you safe.
Right. So,
Yeah.
Melanie, here's a question. Do you ever get to Bozeman, Montana?
You know what? We drove through there several years ago. I'll have to check out some of those waterfalls that you mentioned.
Well, I was going to say, keep my information. And if you're near Bozeman, we can take a hike together.
Oh, that would be fun. Absolutely. Very nice. My husband and I, we've been exploring the rails to trails recently. Have you heard about those?
No.
No. So the rails to trails are old railways that are no longer being used, and different towns and different communities are converting them into walking and hiking paths.
Oh,
And many of them have been connected, and so you can go for many, many miles. There's a really big one that runs through British Columbia going north south. And then anyways, they're all over the country. I can't name them all, but I imagine there's probably something over by Bozeman also for a rails to trails. I'll have to look at that.
probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but that would be probably more on flatter land. Uh,
Usually, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Usually, like it'll go through the valleys. So
right,
wherever, you got your mountain ranges, and then going through the valley is where
right.
the trail would be. I have a few more questions for you. Let's do this first. Where can people find your book?
The easiest way to find the book is on Amazon, and it's there and available, and the audiobook is there too.
Good.
So, and people, one of the things I really appreciate so much is that people are finding it really inspiring. It's inspiring them. Well, if she could get over that, then I could get over this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Good. And so it's titled You'll Never Walk Alone. Now, are you also working on another book? Is it called Chasing Waterfalls?
No, no, no.
I think you should.
This, this book actually, in the beginning, was called Keep Chasing Waterfalls.
Okay.
When I wrote it, that was the working title of it. And then we thought it needed a different title because it's not just about waterfalls. And although that is a central theme, no, right now we're just having fun with this book.
Very fun. That's awesome. While I was reading your book, I really enjoyed it, by the way. While I was reading your book, it made me think of I need almost want to do a quest of chasing hot springs because I love hot springs, especially natural hot springs, the ones that you find out in nature, the ones with natural rocks, not the man-made versions where they capture the hot springs and the mineral waters, but those natural ones that you find. And we found lots of those in Iceland. I think you mentioned that you hiked in Iceland and some of the waterfalls there. And so just finding the hot springs that are just out there in nature and the thermal areas. I love that. So maybe that'll be my next quest is chasing hot springs.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. All right. So a few rapid fire questions just for fun. What's your favorite place that you've hiked?
Well, I guess my very, very favorite, although there's fierce competition for this, was probably the helicopter hiking I did in New Zealand.
Which
We,
island did you do? Is that south?
yeah,
The South
and
Island?
yeah, and you get in this little Robbie 44, which we now know that these are really seriously lethal flying instruments, but I didn't know that then. And they fly you in the helicopter, it's just this round little glass dome you're in, and they fly you and a guide into the middle of absolutely nowhere because in New Zealand, there are lots of gorgeous places that are not accessible by any way except by helicopter or something, and they drop you in the middle of nowhere to have an extraordinary day in nature.
Nice. That sounds beautiful. My husband and I, we're planning to be in New Zealand in February next year. So we'll have to check some of that out, definitely. What is your favorite trail snack?
Oh, trail snack. That's an interesting question. Probably nuts, just bringing along walnuts, just almonds. You can carry it in your pocket.
Gotcha. What about, do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee, coffee, coffee.
Coffee, coffee, coffee. Sunrise or sunset?
In terms of hiking,
Which do you prefer? Yes.
I like them both. I think I spoke momentarily about the first sunrise hike I did. I hadn't realized I'd never done one before. And especially in Montana in the summer when it's 39 degrees out, boy, that's fun.
So when you were talking about that sunrise hike, it just made me think of something. You said something about they were carrying fire pots. What was that?
Oh, the fire in the parking lot where we gathered, they
Oh,
had
okay.
these big fire pots because although it was summer, it's cold there in the morning. So it was very nice just to gather around these fire pots.
Oh, I see. Okay, so there is kind of a place to warm up. Nice.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Do you prefer, I already know your answer to this one. Solo hike or group hikes?
Oh, well, you know my answer.
I
Um,
know. Group hikes all the way. And
well,
one word,
or just hike with another person. You don't need a group. Just have somebody else there. And,
that's right. Yeah, definitely a safety thing. I agree. What is one word that will describe how hiking makes you feel?
joyful.
Nice. Yes. Thank you so much, Jo. I appreciate you being on the Just Hike podcast today. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with me or anyone who may be listening?
Just get out there and enjoy it. Smell the trees, smell the leaves, touch the leaves, look at the colors, how the leaves all have different colors. You can you can bliss out on just the being in nature.
I like that term, bliss out. All right. Thank you so much, Jo. I appreciate you. And definitely keep in touch. And I will share links about your book and where people can get it. Okay.
And remember, Melanie, you've got an invitation to come hiking in Bozeman.
Oh, that would be fun. I would love that. All right. Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
Jo, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I love how your journey shows that hiking isn't about perfection. It's about continuing to show up in whatever way you can. And to everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, take that next step. Whether it's a short walk, getting back on the trail, or setting a new goal, it all starts with showing up. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you follow the Just Hyke podcast, share it with a friend, and leave a review. This really helps others find the show. You can also connect with me through Just Hyke for training, trail tips, and resources, and help you go from sidewalk to summit. Until next time, start where you are and just hike.